Good evening. I'm Steve Croft. Tonight, we will take a look at the intricacies of eminent domain. Back in 2005, the Supreme Court made a landmark decision in Kelo v. City of New London. In a split 5-4 decision, the court ruled that the governmental taking of property from one private owner to another in furtherance of economic development constitutes a permissible public use under the Fifth Amendment's taking clause. Since Kelo, the New York Times reports that 43 states have passed or adopted legislation regarding eminent domain, an example of dual federalism, with the federal government operating in distinct spheres. New York, however, is one of the 7 states that has yet to propose legislation on eminent domain. Tonight, we will take a look at an eminent domain case in Auburn, New York, where the city is threatening to invoke eminent domain for a private project, an 88-room hotel and a conference center. Doug Ward owns a local dog salon called Wagon Tail that will be destroyed for a hotel's parking lot. The Supreme Court back in 2005 ruled that the government has the right to take private property for, quote, furtherance of economic development. So the Auburn Industrial Development Agency, in effect, is not actually committing a crime. What are your thoughts on this?
Well, these people are like a Robin Hood from a backwards world. They steal from the poor and they give to the rich. And if that's not a crime, then we live in a morally baseless country. If I'm forced to move, my business will never recover, and I'll lose my entire customer base in an instant like that. And it's not just about the businesses that will be lost, it's about people's entire livelihoods. What are people supposed to do for their families? How will they support them? What about the future?
The Auburn Industrial Development Agency, who declined our request for an interview, but along with the mayor, is not backing down on its threat to use eminent domain in this lovely town of Auburn and take away 3 homes and 4 businesses to make way for an $11 million hotel. Mr. Mayor, what do you have to say on the behalf of your town's recent eminent domain proposal?
Well, when it comes to an eminent domain, nobody wants to willingly take the property of other citizens. But in order to prove a town, sacrifices have to be made.
Is it fair to improve the lives of some while crippling the dreams of other Americans?
The hotel is about Auburn's future. Auburn simply cannot flourish without a strengthened tax base and an increase in tourism. Is it right to consider the hotel?
How much money in tax revenue do you expect to make off of this new hotel?
Our sources estimate about $1.1 million per year and approximately 112 jobs. In this downtrodden economy, it is just too good of an opportunity to give up.
Auburn is not the only town to engage in the taking of private property to resell to other private enterprises. According to Castle Coalition, an organization dedicated to fighting eminent domain abuse, there were more than 10,000 actual and threatened eminent domain cases between the years of 1998 and 2003. Furthermore, according to the New York Department of Public Records, there have been over 2,300 cases in the state of New York alone. Cities such as Lakewood, Ohio, and New London, Connecticut have all lain victim to the problems of eminent domain. Mr. Ward, how do you plan on stopping the mayor and the town of Auburn from condemning your business?
Well, on April 3rd, 150 other local business owners and myself had a protest to voice our dissatisfaction with the eminent domain abuse that the state of New York is orchestrating in the city of Auburn. The bottom line is, this is a gross abuse of power on both a state and national level. The Constitution is formed by our framers to protect the citizen from the power of government. It's trying to limit our government so that our freedoms are protected in that matter. And that's being infringed upon right now, grossly, and it needs to come to an end.
Now, the mayor claims that without the new hotel, the city won't produce enough property taxes that the city so desperately needs. Additionally, the new jobs could stimulate the local economy. What are your thoughts on this?
Well, the small businesses are what make up the life force of the local economy in the city of Auburn. I can guarantee the mayor that if he seizes these properties, it will do far greater damage than a lack of tax revenue to the local economy.
Now, the Constitution calls for just compensation when taking one's property. The state does not negotiate a price, but rather determines a fair value, yet this compensation is rarely just. According to CBS News, the government can offer as little as 21% of the fair market value. Interestingly enough, when the Bill of Rights was written, it was intended to weaken the power of the federal government, but the Takings Clause has actually strengthened the power of the federal government. I asked Mr. Ward what it's like to be threatened with eminent domain on a daily basis.
The Constitution promises that no state shall deny anybody the right to life, liberty, or property without due process of law. Right now, my fundamental right is being infringed upon gravely. And in the next month, I'll either have to relocate or I'm going to have to fight this injustice that's being committed by the state. I think that I'm going to stick with the latter.
The Supreme Court would argue that your fundamental rights are not being violated.
Well, you can tell the Supreme Court the same question you just asked me, but they've never really had their property or their business unreasonably seized from them.
We caught up with the mayor in his lovely Auburn home and asked him if he believed he is upholding a promise to the citizens of Auburn.
Grab a seat.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Well, we do have a responsibility to the entire community. We don't want to hurt an individual property owner or a business owner, but we have to look at the long-range effects that it'll have on the entire community.
Now, do you believe that eminent domain is being too widely throughout the country?
Eminent domain should not be used wantonly. It should be used only when there's good reason. In this situation, I believe the benefit is quite obvious.
Now, what exactly is this benefit that you speak of, Mr. Mayor?
Well, the creation of hundreds of jobs, the promotion of tourism, and the increase in tax revenues. Not to mention the beautification of the
Even if that
area.
comes at the expense of the hard-working and tax-paying American who someday could maybe achieve and obtain a house of this stature?
Well, in the long run, everyone will benefit from the hotel. The hotel will bring new people to Auburn and create new business. The added tax revenues will enable us to build up our town that will inevitably benefit everyone.
Mr. Ward and the other tax-paying citizens of Auburn would not agree with you, sir.
Well, they don't have the responsibility of running an entire town.
Mr. Ward had a different view on the matter.
Americans consider property rights to be a God-given right of sorts because it's so closely linked to the home and their livelihoods and their family. It strikes close to home in their hearts. We can't allow the government to go unchecked in this abuse of power because they're just stealing from the populace, and it's wrong. They're taking Americans' hard-earned work, their places of living, and their places of business and just giving it into the hands of private owners, and that has to be balanced. It has to be checked. In the purest form, eminent domain was necessary, but this isn't eminent domain anymore. This goes beyond that. This is a form of legal stealing, and it goes against the framing views of the Constitution, the original founding fathers.
And now, a few minutes with Andy Rubin.
Eminent domain has been on my mind recently after I visited the site of the notorious property rights case, New London, Connecticut. The plaintiff, Suzette Kilo, had her property taken when the city of New London decided it needed Kilo's land, as well as 115 other homes for private development that included residential, hotel, commercial, and a new park that would complement a $350 million Pfizer pharmaceutical facility. The development promised 3,200 jobs and $1.2 million a year in tax revenues. Now, New London's prized economic development plan has fallen apart with the economic downturn. Kilo's pink home stood for 107 years, but this empty land is all that remains from New London's development plans. Thank you, and have a good night.